A sick little girl's touching request transforms a widowed CEO millionaire's life. 4. John Hargrave stared through the gleaming glass walls of his San Francisco office late that afternoon, the sun casting a dull orange hue over the bay. The sounds of corporate triumphs and bustling streets muted into an eerie silence that cloaked his heart in solitude. He had built this empire, one that pulsed with innovation and ambition, yet it felt but a shadow of the life he had once shared with his late wife. The ache of her absence clawed at him silently as he shifted through the day's agenda, feeling the weight of expectation press heavier with each tick of the clock. "Tonight, a charity event at the Children's Hospital," he muttered under his breath, his stomach tightening. A public relations engagement, he assumed, nothing more than a favor to soothe investors and polish his public persona. The thought of mingling amidst children with chronic illness made his skin itch. Yet the relentless pressures of his role urged him forward, promising rewards for appearances, respect, adoration, profit. Hesitation draped around his shoulders like an old gray coat, but it wouldn't do to fall weak now. Arriving at the hospital, he was enveloped by the haunting blend of antiseptic and hope. Laughter danced in the air, a bright, defiant melody among muted cries. His pulse quickened as he was led to a room where there she sat, Mia, a 9-year-old with a spirit that radiated despite her frail form. Her eyes, pools of innocence untouched by the harsh truths of life, pierced through him with an electric jolt. A letter to Santa, asking for a family. The words tumbled from her lips like candy, innocent and profound, igniting something deep within him, a flicker of warmth battling the bitter cold of his heart. The request felt absurd, yet it stirred unresolved grief that simmered in his chest. He saw in her yearning the echoes of his own desires, family, laughter, a legacy to share. A bittersweet realization hit him. He craved connection just as fiercely as she did. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Returning home, his mind spun with the contrast of Mia's simple wish and his looming business deal. A merger that promised 10-figure returns and accolades that could reshape his company's future. But something, a voice deep within, battled against this glittering vision. Was success merely a collection of numbers? The thought of chasing yet another triumph while Mia, vibrant yet broken, waited for a sliver of love, clawed at his conscience. And as he lay in the cold expanse of his bedroom, the walls closing in, echoes of laughter meshed with the ache of loneliness. His wife's laughter, whispers of dreams dashed too soon, collided with Mia's innocent longing, a collision that promised upheaval. What was he willing to sacrifice? How long could he ignore the truth unraveling within him? The clock ticked, time slipping through his fingers, the ultimatum undeniable. As his thoughts spiraled, John grappled with the reality of his life. Was it enough? Was chasing fortune worth the price of a chance at love? A chance to become the father he always wanted to be? The turmoil quaked violently, the decision looming large. Would he choose to bury his heart again in pursuit of wealth, or would he learn to break free from the confines of ambition to embrace the deeper connections life offered? As the questions roared like a tempest within, John felt the weight of his choice bearing down. And the night stretched on. John awoke the next morning, the sunlight filtering through his bedroom window, casting bars of gold that seemed to pull him from the depths of troubling dreams. The remnants of Mia's plea echoed in his mind, a plea that transcended the superficial tribulations of his corporate world. He sat up, heart racing as he glimpsed the reflection in the mirror, a man torn between aspiration and humanity. The day sprawled before him, presenting a stark dichotomy, between a meeting that could solidify his professional future and an impending decision that might redefine his personal life. Boardroom discussions about numbers and strategies seemed monotonous and trivial compared to a girl's desperate wish for a family. Rising from the shadows of indecision, John found himself drawn to the enigma of choice. He needed to confront the driving force behind his choices, the ingrained ambition that had often kept him isolated. As he arrived at the office, his hands trembled with uncertainty. The boardroom represented a battleground of egos and visions, yet he felt increasingly like an outsider. Faces around the table blurred into a haze of corporate camaraderie that held no place for connection, empathy, or vulnerability. The chatter about mergers and projections felt mechanical, devoid of life. His heart thumped in his chest as he began to rethink everything he had clung to for so long. "John, are you with us?" Mark, his chief financial officer, interrupted his daze, snapping him back to the present. The room turned its collective gaze toward him, all eyes expectant. "Yes, of course," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He navigated the conversation, managing to steer clear of his deepening conflict, yet words felt heavy on his tongue. Ideas about relinquishing portions of his merging deal skimmed over his mind like reflections half-formed. The more he processed the impending transaction, the more he felt himself growing uncomfortable with the garish figures flashing neon colors on the screen. Returning home that evening, John longed for solitude, but found himself haunted by Mia's innocence. Pulling out his laptop, instead of delving into spreadsheets, he began scrolling through the hospital's website, reading the stories of children like Mia, whose dreams were too often shelved for practicality. Each story resonated deeply, filling him with an unsettling mix of urgency and purpose. He oscillated between what was expected of him, a successful CEO, and what he yearned to become, a man capable of creating warmth in the lives of others. That undeniable shift in his reality was igniting a passion within him, threatening to undo years of painstakingly curated priorities. As he clicked through the heart-wrenching narratives, he stumbled upon a volunteer opportunity at the hospital, aimed at providing companionship and mentorship to children facing chronic illnesses. His breath hitched. A glimmer of resolve took birth within him. Could this be a way to address that gnawing void, to unearth the kind of impact that transcends wealth? He couldn't ignore the pull any longer. Lifting his pen, John started writing down his thoughts, detailing how he could balance leading his firm and investing time in these children. Each word felt liberating, a release from the confines of corporate ambition he had long associated with success. But the moment of realization was so captivating that it culminated in a new dilemma. Would he be able to share this newfound direction with his board without risking their disdain? The fear of rejection seeped in, heavy and oppressive. The clock ticked on the wall, a relentless reminder that the choices he needed to make were looming closer. He knew that time had come to face not just the board, but the deeper, unrecognized dimensions of himself. The quest for a meaningful legacy had begun, but how could he manifest it? John leaned back in his chair, heart aflame yet burdened with trepidation. And in that moment, uncertainty gripped him anew. Would he choose the familiar path of corporate ascendance once more, or would he dare to venture into uncharted territories of the heart, forever changing the landscape of his life? The morning came too quickly, the sun already shining brightly when John's alarm broke the stillness. With sleep still clinging to him, his mind replayed last night's revelations. The deepening conflict within him ignited an urgency that felt electric yet terrifying. He realized his previous life, defined by meetings and forecasts, had never stirred this kind of raw emotion. Stepping into his office, he felt the weight of his own indecision. Each carefully curated corner of this space, once a source of pride, now reminded him of his internal dissonance. He could hear his colleagues discussing the upcoming mergers like they were planning a day at the spa, oblivious to the turmoil brewing in his heart. As he settled at his desk, John's gaze landed on the volunteer opportunity paper he had printed. It felt like a beacon in a storm, a potential anchor that could guide him toward a purpose beyond profitability. Yet the thought of raising it in board discussions intimidated him. He grimaced at the idea of being labeled weak or distracted. "Have you finalized the figures for the meeting tomorrow?" Mark's voice pulled him from his reverie. "Not yet," John replied, his mind still half occupied with visions of Mia's smile. "I've been reevaluating our strategy a bit." "Reevaluating? At this stage?" Mark blinked, his eyebrows knitting together. "This is not the time for second-guessing, John. We're on the brink of something monumental here." John felt the room close in around him. Mark's insistence was the heavy voice of the old world he wanted to escape. "I know, but maybe this isn't just about profits anymore. There are—" He dared not say the words aloud, fearing mockery. "There are what?" Mark's tone turned sharp. "People? Emotions? Those don't belong in this room. We sell value, John, a stark, cold calculation of fiduciary duty." A reply died in his throat. Instead, he felt a surge of anger that birthed a different kind of clarity. Was this really all he wanted? Hollow victories? A title that meant little without meaning? The disconnect gnawed at him. Throughout the day, he struggled to concentrate. During lunch, he stared at his untouched salad, thoughts drowned in uncertainty. Could he risk everything for an untested path? But the more he considered Mia, the more he knew he had to navigate toward her world. That evening, John's resolve crystallized. He opened his laptop and began drafting a proposal, not only for the company, but also for himself, merging both ambitions into a unified vision. He focused on outlining how corporate social responsibility could benefit the firm's reputation, while providing a much-needed heart to his legacy. Each typed word felt like a step toward liberation, a merging of his two divergent paths. As he reviewed his notes, he felt a pang of guilt. What would his board think? They thrived on tradition and numbers, ethics in their minds a distraction. Could he truly share this with them? With every word he poured onto the screen, he felt a growing need to confront this fear and embrace the uncomfortable truth of his desires. Before he finalized his document, John hesitated, the cursor blinking mockingly at him. Voices from the boardroom echoed in the back of his mind. This was it, the moment that defined who he was becoming. The words finally tumbled out. "We need to redefine what success looks like for our company." Just as he clicked save, uncertainty crawled back into his chest. Would this be enough to drive real change, or would it be another ill-fated venture hampered by doubt? Tomorrow would bring the board meeting, an arena where his courage would either flourish or falter. As John took a deep breath, he contemplated the potential backlash, the chance of failure looming like a specter. But he also felt charged, a sudden determination igniting within him. Facing both the board and his own awakening self, he acknowledged that the stakes were no longer merely numbers on a ledger. This was about lives and connections, an exhilarating risk. Just before he settled down for the night, John received a message from the hospital, an invitation to meet Mia, the little girl whose spirit haunted him, whose hope had ignited his quest. He froze, the reality pressing against him like the weight of stone. What would happen when he met her? Would this be the tipping point that changed everything once and for all? John awoke the next morning, anticipation and dread locking him in a tight embrace. The invitation to Mia throbbed in his mind. This wasn't merely an appointment. It felt like clawing his way to the surface after gasping for breath underwater. He readied himself for the day as if suiting up for battle, smoothing his shirt and adjusting his tie, but the reflection in the mirror revealed a man torn between two worlds. Arriving at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with the usual frenetic energy. Conversations swirled around him, but all he could think about was the meeting with the board. The tension gathered in his chest like a storm cloud. Would they dismiss his proposals as just another phase, or disrupt the ongoing effort for more lucrative avenues? He wouldn't be ignored any longer. "Hey, John, ready for the big presentation?" Mark's voice cut through his reverie. He noticed the raised eyebrows, the veiled skepticism cloaked as casual interest. "Absolutely," John replied, forcing a confident smile. As the meeting drew closer, he mulled over the insights he drafted. Briefly glancing at his notes again, he felt the friction of ambition versus fear. Reining in his nerves, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a career decision. It was a pivotal moment in his existence. He wished to embody the values that had begun to surface within him, the bettering of lives alongside the bottom line. Finally, seated at the boardroom table, the wave of anxiety swelled. The sleek, polished surface of the table had witnessed enough standoffish negotiations and dismissed propositions over the years. Today, it would serve as his battleground. "Let's get started." The CEO's voice boomed as the room settled into a silence that felt like a challenging stare-down. John knew that the respect he sought was on the line, perhaps even his future in this firm. He began with the numbers, outlining the company's current performance, the forecast, and the potential fallout of the impending merger. Yet, before he could lose himself in the metrics, he shifted gears. "I'd like to talk about something transformative." The words hung in the air, quiet but palpable with tension. "Transformative?" Mark's voice was laced with disbelief, and others shifted in their seats, glancing at one another, unsure of what to expect. Transformative? Corporate social responsibility is not just a distraction, it's a method to redefine success. With every word, John felt some fear dissipate. He spoke of impact, of shifting narratives that brought meaning, reflecting on his burgeoning connection with Mia. Imagine a company that not only pursues profit, but uplifts communities, helping those who need it most. "Are you trying to turn our boardroom into a charity event?" a board member interjected, arms crossed and face skeptical. "This isn't about charity," John snapped, the urgency in his voice more assertive than he intended. "It's about creating a legacy that holds weight." The conversation turned electric, voices mingling in surprise, skepticism, and burgeoning support. John could see doubt flash across faces, minds racing. He locked eyes with Mark, who wore an expression of non-believing disbelief that narrowly masked concern. Bouts of silences consumed the room, but underneath them grew a crackling intensity. His proposal felt like the cusp of change, yet it came at a price. His career could be dismantled depending on their responses. As he prepared to wrap up, he noticed a certain glare from a corner. Someone else appeared more focused on him than the charts. There was genuine curiosity. "John," he said, "what if we look at pilot programs, small steps, but a direction worth taking?" A moment's fade followed, a flicker of hope. John's heart raced. Were they finally considering a path toward the new he envisioned? Nevertheless, the objections began to crop up again. Then he remembered Mia, her smile, her unwavering spirit. That she was out there fighting her own battle while he wrestled with abstract corporate responsibilities suddenly struck him as a stark juxtaposition. "Can we be bold in hoping for more than profits?" he asked, voice steady, unyielding. "Can we challenge the narrative around what defines a successful business?" The murmurs in the room pulsed, but it wasn't the end. John felt the weight of their gaze, and he suddenly transformed that fear into resolve. "I have a meeting scheduled with Mia today," he added, leaning forward, addressing them each deliberately. "I'll carry your doubts along with her laughter. But know this, she embodies the very drive I wish for us to adopt." Just as he spoke, the door creaked open. A new board member, an unexpected ally, entered, curiosity written across their features. John's fate hung delicately poised, the outcome uncertain. How would the tides of change push in the coming hours? Would his vulnerability unveil a new chapter, or would it take an unexpected ally to grab hold of this vision alongside him? The board erupted in a flurry of speculation and comments, the air thick with uncertainty swirling like autumn leaves. John felt the heat rise in his cheeks as he understood that stepping onto this precarious bridge of ideas had ignited passions, both for and against. A pulse of adrenaline surged through him, nudging him forward as he grasped tightly to this moment. His voice regained its steadiness, but within a storm brewed. "Let's explore the potential," he continued, sensing the moment balancing on a knife's edge. "We've got the analytics to back it up."
Let's not dismiss this before we even start. This could redefine our brand in more expansive ways than we ever thought possible. Each nod from the newly caught ally destabilized the fortified disconnect he'd sensed previously among the board members. Their previous reservations morphed into questions. The tension in the air crackled with a newfound energy that urged John forward. The door swung closed as their ally took a seat, signaling a shift in dynamics. Perhaps this was the change he longed for, a tangible sign that someone was willing to consider his vision seriously. "Which areas are we looking at for pilot programs?" the ally posed, an inquisitive expression lighting their face. "And how do you plan to measure success beyond the immediate ROI?" John leaned into the questions. It was what he had hoped. They were engaging. "I propose we start with communities we are already a part of. Look for local partnerships that align with our values. If we can prove the impact within a single neighborhood, then we can scale up. The metrics will be based not only on traditional returns, but also on community feedback and engagement levels." He could feel Mark's skeptical gaze still weighing him down, yet he focused on the ally, drawing confidence from their open-mindedness. "I want to lead with purpose. Show shareholders that social responsibility can enhance our bottom line, cultivate loyalty, and create our narrative." The discussion deepened. They began brainstorming ideas, focusing on metrics that intertwine sustainability with profitability. Each suggestion heightened John's energy, suffocating the dread that had spiraled so easily in the early hours. A flicker of hope danced in the corners of his mind, moments stirring reminiscent shards of brightness that had dulled with doubt. By the time the meeting wrapped up, John felt the strain of fatigue but was exhilarated. He was no longer just floating through the currents of convention. He had thrust himself into the depths, challenging entrenched norms, and, for at least one meeting, emerged with an unlikely coalition. As he walked out, he stole a glance at the clock. Hours had gone, painting over the deep-rooted concern that had settled in his stomach. The very thought of meeting Mia was like a visceral reminder of what mattered. She was out there, dedicated, resilient, inspiring. With that grounded sense of purpose, he left the boardroom and headed toward their rendezvous. What awaited him behind the cafe's glass doors held more weight than just a pleasant conversation. Mia embodied the hopes he wished to cultivate not merely within his professional realms, but as part of who he was evolving into. The way she fought for her causes inspired him to consider parts of himself he'd held at bay, hesitant to let them loose within the boardroom. Each step toward the cafe felt heavier with meaning. Just before reaching the door, his phone buzzed. A message from Mia, her words suddenly monumental. "I need to talk. There's something important I want to share with you." Energy surged through him, anticipation mingling with anxiety. What could she possibly want? Did she sense his own wanting for change? A new journey that entwined their lives and values? With a final deep breath, John pushed the door open, stepping into the warm vibration of the cafe and uncertainty. The moment of truth was upon him. What revelation awaited him within, and how would it shift the course he had only just begun to steer? The scent of coffee enveloped him as the cafe buzzed with muffled chatter. John spotted Mia in a corner, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, brow furrowed in concentration. The sight of her felt like a tether to sanity amid the whirlwind of corporate ambitions. As he drew closer, her eyes met his, and an unwelcome tension coiled in his gut.
Something in her expression spoke of significance, adding weight to her words. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly, gesturing to the empty seat opposite her. He sat down, heart racing in anticipation. "Of course, I was looking forward to it. You said you had something important to share?" Mia took a moment, her gaze drifting, as if searching for the right words among the noise. John could feel an immediate pull, the way she wrestled with the weight of unspoken thoughts resonating within him. He'd been shaken loose from the complacency of routine, and now the contours of his existence felt fragile. "I've been working on a project," she finally said, voice steady yet vulnerable. "A children's initiative focused on wellness and education for underprivileged areas. A way to combine both my passion for advocacy and some of the strategies from your corporate world." The pieces clicked together for John. Mia's dedicated spirit always urged her toward the underserved. Yet there was something deeper at play. "That sounds incredible," he responded, trying to mask his hesitation. But it's bigger than I can handle on my own," she interrupted gently. "I need your expertise. Your team's resources could bring this to life." A rush of unease flooded him. Her request unearthed echoes of his ambitions, those he had hoped to merge with a greater purpose. He envisioned a tapestry of success, intertwining both their paths, yet shadows of self-doubt lingered. "Mia, I've just begun to pave my way in a corporate environment that doesn't often embrace social responsibility. I'm not sure I can take on more." "Don't let fear hold you back, John," Mia said, a steel resolve shining through her voice. "Think of how powerful we could be. This isn't just a project, it's a way to change lives." Her eyes locked onto his, and John felt as if she were peeling back layers he'd carefully constructed. The weight of their conversation shifted, morphing his initial resistance into contemplation. Perhaps this was not merely an extension of work. It could redefine him and breathe life into his newfound aspirations. But the specter of Mark's skepticism hung over him, a mental barrier standing between doubt and resolute action. He wondered if he had the strength to face both the board and the challenges of such a venture. The fear of failure loomed menacingly in his periphery. As Mia continued to speak, detailing her vision, he found himself lost in her enthusiasm, his heart responding to her passion. Despite the initial dread, a flicker of excitement ignited within him. There was potential for his corporate wisdom to intertwine with her fervor in a way neither had anticipated. "I'd like to help," he finally said, his voice steadier than he felt inside. "But I need to be sure this aligns with my career and with their expectations." "That's the key," Mia replied, a smile unfurling across her face. "This project could reshape how your company is viewed, bringing in fresh perspectives. It could become a symbol of what you stand for." The ground felt unsteady beneath him, yet for the first time, John sensed he was on the cusp of a profound transformation. The boardroom battles were no longer merely a game of corporate politics. He could become a catalyst for change, merging profit with purpose. As they spoke of logistics and aspirations, John began to envision a narrative that blended his professional ambitions with heartfelt impact. This could be the initiative that defined him, not just as a businessman, but as someone who dared to intertwine his journey with humanity's. With these thoughts bubbling within him, he felt clarity. But as the weight of committing to such a journey settled, uncertainty loomed anew. What sacrifices would this endeavor demand? Mia, upon reading the renewed resolve on his face, leaned closer. "We need to act fast, and I can't do this without you." John took a deep breath. The moment had arrived to confront the realities of this partnership, to decide if he was ready to plunge headfirst into a new reality that would reshape everything he thought he knew about himself. Standing at the crossroads, one question echoed loud in his mind. Would he transform his career and himself,
at the risk of everything he knew? As John's breathing steadied, a wave of determination overtook his initial trepidation. The busy cafe faded from his awareness. The only reality that remained was the fierce energy radiating from Mia as they shared ideas and formulated a plan. He recognized then that this was more than a collaborative project. It was a potential lifeline for both of them, a chance to reshape who they were. "Let's break this down," he said, after a pause that felt electrified with possibility. "What specifically do you envision as our first step? We need to turn this passion into something actionable." The words tasted foreign yet invigorating on his tongue. Mia's eyes brightened with eagerness. "I thought we could start with a pilot program, identify a few schools, and gather input from community leaders. Then we can customize our approach based on their needs." John nodded, mentally mapping out potential timelines and resources. "We'll need to present this concept."
Mark. His input could sway the board towards mobilizing necessary resources. The mention of Mark ignited another wave of doubt. John's experience in front of the boardroom's cold gaze flashed through his mind. Mark was known for the discouraging ceiling he placed on bold ideas. Yet a part of John felt invigorated at the thought of challenging that status quo. "Mark won't easily back this," he cautioned, trying to sound pragmatic, though a part of him wanted to rally against that notion. "We'll have to show clear potential for ROI." Mia leaned back, contemplating. "ROI is important, but perhaps we could frame it differently. Show the board how engaged communities lead to more loyal customers, or even new market opportunities. It's all about storytelling, how we present the narrative." The light of enthusiasm brightened Mia's expression, and John felt her infectious spirit sweeping through him. There was complexity in appealing to Mark, and he could feel the fissures of his old corporate self struggle against the emerging version of himself that craved authenticity and purpose. For a moment, the cafe guarded their conversation. It became a sanctuary for two individuals at a pivotal juncture in their lives. John envisioned standing up in the sterile boardroom, heart pounding, voicing a vision that had far-reaching implications beyond mere profits. It terrified him and thrilled him in equal measure. As they carved out ideas, John's mind flickered back to a simple lesson from his earlier career days. Every groundbreaking venture came with its fair share of peril. Within the exhilaration of transforming lives, he felt the weight of the ultimatum looming closer. The deeper he dove into this project, the riskier it became for his standing within the company. "Could we bring in local businesses as sponsors?" he suggested, shoving aside his doubts for the moment. "Leverage community connections. If they buy into our mission, we might unlock more support." Mia sat forward, her eyes widening at the notion. "Exactly. With their backing, it could lend credibility to our initiative. Community-wide endorsement could sway the board." As she spoke, John sensed a growing resolve. The more they plotted their course, the more his vision crystallized. It was a far cry from the staid corporate treadmill he had been trudging through, shining with the hope of something transformative, not just for himself, but for those who needed support. Yet when the excitement settled, a harsh truth still lingered. He had recently faced the dangerous tides of corporate ambition, and now throwing himself into this monumental commitment felt akin to jumping off a cliff without knowing where he would land. "Let's say this works," he said slowly, testing the sturdy ground of reality beneath his thoughts. "What if we fail? The scrutiny won't just be on the project, it'll be on us." Mia's brows furrowed but softened with understanding. "Every risk holds that possibility, John. But what if we don't? We have the chance to change lives. That's what matters." His heart raced. The thrill and fear tangled within him, but Mia's unwavering spirit ignited something deep. He could redefine success, not merely by the accolades, but through significance. Feeling a surge of inspiration, John reached for his phone. "Let's schedule a meeting with Mark ASAP. The sooner we present this, the sooner we can get to work." As he tapped the screen, the anticipation coiled tightly in his gut.
This was the first crucial step towards his new identity, but the shadow of doubt flickered persistently. What awaited him in the boardroom? Would he be able to forge ahead or retreat into safety? As he maintained hope for the shape of a fresh narrative, John realized one undeniable truth. The moment had arrived to face the very fears he thought he had outgrown. Would he dare to confront them, or would he retreat back to the familiar? John was pacing. The weight of the upcoming meeting twisted in his stomach, and adrenaline coursed through his veins like a racing river. With the afternoon sun streaming through his office window, illuminating the scattered papers and coffee-stained notepads, he took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus despite the persistent whispers of self-doubt. Every tick of the clock echoed the same question. Was he truly ready for this? He replayed the plan he had devised with Mia, overlaying each point in his mind. The message they needed to communicate wasn't merely a product of imagination or even statistics. It was a heartfelt call to action. But would he have the courage to convey that? To move the narrative from a dry analysis of ROI to a compelling story that could engage and inspire? Suddenly, he realized he had scaled back his ambition in the face of uncertainty. Instead of imagining doom, why not visualize the potential uplift? What if they could reshape how the board viewed not just this proposal, but corporate responsibility itself? He needed to transform his perspective, to redefine the stakes. This wasn't just about securing a project. It was about stepping into a version of himself he had long avoided, a leader who championed meaningful change. The clock struck 1, bringing him back to reality. It was almost time for the meeting. A quick glance in the mirror confirmed his suit was still pristine, but it could never mask the churning reality of his emotions. "Focus, John," he muttered, trying to drown out the discouragement. "You're not just presenting, you're starting a movement." The meeting room was larger than he had anticipated, its cold, corporate design offering little comfort. Mark sat at the head of the long table, flanked by board members, all tightly bound in their roles. John's heart raced, yet beneath the surface of anxiety surged a current of determination. As he began to speak, the words flowed with increasing clarity. He pulled them into the narrative Mia had crafted. Local engagement leading to enhanced market loyalty, potential benefits extending beyond the company to the community, and a chance for their firm to be a part of something greater. But then, Mark interjected, eyes narrowing with skepticism. "What makes you think this will appeal to our shareholders?" In that moment, a spark ignited within John. It wasn't just about numbers or market trends. It was about recognizing shared humanity. Without losing the thread of his presentation, John's voice steadied as he pivoted to a personal narrative drawn from his own experiences, reflecting on a childhood spent in less fortunate circumstances and how those moments shaped his values. As he spoke of change, of impact that could ripple through families and neighborhoods, he noticed the slight soften in Mark's expression. Yet fear still lingered, a shadow creeping closer with every pause. What if he was exposing too much? What if vulnerability only led to more doubt from the board? But Mia's encouragement echoed in his ear. Every risk holds that possibility. He pushed through the hesitation, leaning into this newfound authenticity. Success isn't just profitability, he concluded. It's about leaving a legacy, about being seen as more than just a business. It's about being a leader who cares. This was it, the moment he had sought, not just for the proposal, but for his own journey towards self-acceptance. As he finished, the room remained quiet, and he held his breath, awaiting the verdict. Mark's piercing gaze held him captive. "You've given us something to think about, John," he finally said, shifting in his seat. Encouragement flickered in the air, but it was immediately interrupted by a sharp voice. "But how will you implement this without sacrificing our quarterly goals?" A new wave of challenge rolled over him like ice. "Implementation means aligning our values with actions," John replied, struggling to keep calm. "Of course we won't neglect profitability, but we can surely transform our approach to how we achieve it." As the dialogue continued, John felt the board's tension shift. They were engaging, pushing back, but there was something different this time. It was a willingness to wrestle with concepts beyond just numbers. Suddenly, a clarity emerged. John's steadfast belief in their mission could inspire doubt and risk to coexist, opening the door to revolutionary change within the company. Would he maintain that voice of conviction as they delve deeper, or would corporate caution chain him back, silencing the sound of his truth? The stakes had never felt so high, and John was moments away from realizing whether he could sustain this transformative momentum. Perhaps it was time to confront not just the boardroom, but also the gaps in his own beliefs about leadership. As the meeting drew on, John couldn't shake the thrill of uncertainty. Would his vision be accepted, or would it be crushed by the weight of rigid traditions? Each moment felt loaded, setting the stage for the journey ahead. As he stood on the precipice of significant change, John leaned over the table, his heart flickering between hope and dread. The board members, once mere figures of authority, were now a live audience to his unfiltered.
The way they listened, some nodding, others scribbling notes, invited him to push harder. He had tasted the shift in their energy. This was no longer just a business proposal. It felt like a collective inquiry into values and purpose. Yet the challenge remained. What specific metrics will you use to showcase progress? The shareholders are only going to want results, John, someone from the side fired back. Taking a steadying breath, he confronted the skepticism without retreating. Metrics can be translated beyond numbers: employee satisfaction, community engagement, brand loyalty. I'm not discarding financial goals. Instead, I'm proposing that we expand our definition of success. He hesitated, grappling with vulnerability, feeling it keenly in his gut. Would this speak to them, or was he overselling a dream? Their faces had transformed into a mirror reflecting his fears, but rather than shy away, he shouldered the intensity. When we align our company with values that resonate on a human level, we inspire loyalty that pays off in ways quarterly reports can't capture. Isn't that the epitome of innovation? A moment of silence reigned again. It felt heavier this time, more loaded. John steadied Mark, searching for cracks in the other man's armor. The older man's brow furrowed, and his lips thinned. But when he finally nodded, it was as if a dam within the room had broken. "Fine, let's talk implementations," Mark declared. "If we're going to make this shift, it has to be rock solid and feasible." With that, fire surged back into John's veins. Mia and I envisioned a phased rollout that includes pilot programs in specific departments, engaging employees, offering training around these principles, monitoring their outcomes, and adjusting our approach based on feedback. He could feel momentum building, an undercurrent of excitement pulsating through him. This was what he craved, an interaction driven by a common goal. It ignited another notion. If they built a coalition around these ideas, could it transform their entire corporate ethos? Yet, as he leaned into the dialogue, he faced his own demons cloaked in familiar insecurities. Would they receive this as authentic leadership, or as merely another strategy wrapped in corporate jargon? This inner battle grew acute. The fear of being labeled an imposter lingered in the background, testing his resolve like a persistent shadow. As someone followed up with a pointed question regarding his childhood inspirations, John sensed it was an invitation to bear more. Should he go deeper, or would he risk losing their respect? He felt the pulse of their curiosity. He couldn't ignore it now. It was a risk worth taking. I remember being that little boy, feeling powerless in a world that often overlooked me. "I've spent most of my career trying to prove I'm more than that," he confessed, his voice low yet steady. "But this isn't just personal. It's about our business becoming a part of something larger." A softness emerged in Mark's demeanor, but doubt flickered among others. "That's noble, John, but can we truly bridge personal experiences with corporate identity?" The tension clung to his next words, a mountain of expectation looming. "Yes, and we must. Every profound change in history began with an individual willing to challenge the status quo. Our company can and should be that force." Each challenge prompted him to step further into this newfound authority. Yet another voice cut through, sharp and accusative. "You might be passionate, but are you prepared to take responsibility for potential failures?" That question lanced through the room, striking deep. John could almost taste the unspoken doubts swelling within. He squared his shoulders, still aware of the churning within him. "I understand the risks," he replied. "But if we proceed thoughtfully, if I'm invested as the leader driving this change, I will shoulder that responsibility with my team. Leadership means vulnerability, and collectively, we can navigate the uncertainty." As they debated specifics and counterarguments, John felt a shift inside, something breaking free. He no longer fought against himself. He was allowing the world to see him, not just as a businessman seeking approval, but as a leader willing to redefine what that really meant. The conversation was lively, teetering on a cusp of transformation. He could almost taste the bittersweet victory, yet the outcome was still hanging by a thread. Acceptance or rejection loomed like engravings of fate across the table. His heart pounded as he considered the possibilities, his resolve rattling at the edges. The time had come for him to face not only the board's decision, but the inner critic that had long governed his actions. What would become of him if he embraced the risk of failure and all the lessons that came with it? As the discussion continued, the atmosphere charged and playful. He felt new strength rising within him. But could he maintain this momentum? Would he fully step into his leadership potential, or allow doubt to encircle him and push him down again? As the meeting stretched on, he could sense the answer was just beyond reach. John Hargrave entered his office the day after the board meeting, a sense of purpose guiding his steps. He had faced the tempest of doubt and emerged, not just as a CEO capable of presenting hard numbers, but as a leader willing to undertake a meaningful journey. The investment of his heart into work had transcended transactional obligations. It was about building a legacy, and it felt liberating. Every day since that moment of raw vulnerability, he delved into crafting the new initiative with Mia. The proposal had secured the board's cautious backing to pilot community engagement programs, marking a significant shift in the company's mission. Each meeting reinforced John's belief that he had stepped away from the suffocating confines of ambition alone. It was now about alliance between profit and purpose. Mia's infectious zeal radiated from every interaction as they mapped out the details. John transformed ideas into action plans. It reminded him that success meant reaching out to the underserved while also uplifting
His firm's brand. It anchored him in a new responsibility, one that felt both daunting and deserving. As they kicked off the pilot project at a nearby school, cheering children sparkled with hope, and John watched their joy burgeon, echoing in the laughter that rippled through the space. In that moment, he understood the profound simplicity of connection. He had given himself a chance at something larger than life and rediscovered the essence of humanity within the business realm. His first meeting with local parents, community leaders, and school officials felt monumental. He shared their vision, articulated the measurable impacts they sought to create, enrichment programs that built resilience in children, and established firm roots in the community. The support he received reinforced his conviction about evolving perceptions of corporate responsibility. However, to his surprise, pride flooded him as many local representatives praised his willingness to venture beyond traditional leadership paradigms. Their acknowledgement struck a chord deep within. It wasn't merely validation, it was an affirmation of his growth. John realized he was stepping into his newfound identity, no longer simply a businessman or a widower, but a devoted champion for change. Rewiring perceptions at corporate lunch meetings became equally important. He maintained momentum, now sharing stories of Mia during discussions, showing how engagement initiatives bolstered long-term loyalty. The cold metrics of profit began to melt under the warmth of real narratives. Colleagues and investors began to see their connection not to just a business ledger, but to tangible lives that could be changed. Months later, a recognition award for local business engagement arrived. As John stood at the podium, he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. It was a treasured moment, being acknowledged not just for ambition or numbers, but truly for embodying a transformative purpose. He looked out among those he had worked alongside, the families uplifted, and felt justified pride resonate through his spirit. At that moment, he spotted Mia in the crowd of faces, her small figure beaming with encouragement. He took a deep breath, feeling anchored in his journey. "This is our victory," John declared, his voice steady. He embraced the moment as proof of his growth, a chartered path from the pain of loss to the promise of light. When he turned to the microphone's hum of applause, a gentle smile graced his face. It felt like affirmation not only of his company's direction, but of his own transformation. John had conquered his fears, the anxieties once tethering him to loneliness, and found connection instead, through outreach and feeling human beyond boardroom walls. The legacy he envisioned was etched into every interaction and act of kindness he now embraced. This was the close of a chapter, but the beginning of something more profound, a life imbued with purpose, hope, and connection. He had achieved not just professional recognition, but had redefined what fulfillment meant in his heart. As he stepped down from the podium, he committed. No longer would he shy away from opportunities to inspire.
In unison, the applause enveloped him, matching the echoes of Mia's laughter as they joined together on a journey toward making waves of transformation in their community. He may have arrived at the summit professionally, but he truly soared, embracing the reality that the most significant achievements transcended traditional success. This is where the journey continues, and you need to subscribe now to be part of future emotional stories that inspire change, just like John's. Leave a like now to show your support and feed the algorithm. Your engagement fuels these powerful narratives. Comment your reactions and thoughts about John's transformation. How do stories of personal growth resonate with you? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible conclusion and be inspired to transform their own lives. Together, let's spark a movement of meaningful change.